Becerra. Let me start by apologizing. Of course, we had a meeting, classified briefing this morning that ran over. Of course, we just concluded our caucus because we got backed up a little bit, so we apologize for that, but certainly we're unapologetic for the what's going on across the nation, including more than an additional 500 plus forums and hearings that we conducted on Medicare, and I think it underscores the events as they're unfolding. Clearly in New York, the issue is, Steve Israel likes to say there's three critical points about that race: Medicare, Medicare, Medicare. And Kathy Hochul is an outstanding candidate, and of course without her effort we wouldn't be remotely close. You have to remember that this is a seat that was won with 70% of the vote by Mr. Lee, and in terms of rank order, there are 426 seats that are more attainable for Democrats to win than this seat. So kudos to Steve Israel and the effort that's been done. This will be an incredible event for us, knowing that this is such a difficult a seat to attain. But the reason it's attainable is because of what we've been talking about for the last several weeks, and the insistence on the part of the Republicans of breaking the fundamental compact with the American people. And that fundamental compact is around Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And in their budget, they outline that very clearly. They end Medicare as we know it, and that is why the American people are reacting all across this great nation of ours in response to that. And so we will continue in our caucus to pursue this and to take our message back to the people, which we've done with great success. Our caucus today also focused indeed on the armed services budget that will be on the floor this week, and the ongoing concern that this caucus shares with the American people on the war in Afghanistan. And let me turn at this point to our Vice Chair, Xavier Becerra.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. New York 26 is a clear sign of an agenda without priorities. We would not be where we are today in New York watching an election where, for perhaps the first time this year, the American public will send a message to the House Republican leadership about having the wrong priorities. 5 months, 20 weeks, 140 days, however you want to put it, when you go in the wrong direction, you don't do anything to help create jobs for Americans. You go after Medicare to pay for deficits. The American public at some point is going to speak out. And New York 26 is probably the best indicator of what the American people think about the Republican agenda so far this year. It's been a jobless agenda, and it's been an agenda that tells America's seniors that they must pay twice as much for their Medicare so we can reduce the deficits for things those seniors had nothing to do with. We believe that there are different ways of doing this. We're going to tackle this issue this week, later this week, when the Republicans put salt on the wounds of Americans who are having a tough time holding their jobs, when Republicans move to renege on their agreement from December to fund unemployment benefits for Americans who lost their job through no fault of their own. And so we believe that today we're beginning to see the signs of unrest on the part of the American public, who have grown tired of the Republican agenda not focusing on America's priorities, which should be jobs and protecting and strengthening Medicare. And so we're on course, we believe, to see some interesting results that the American people are speaking to us now. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take questions.
Republicans are saying that the New York 26 has nothing to do with their Medicare plan, that it all has to do with the fact it's a three-way race. You have the third-party Tea Party candidate. Isn't that true? I mean, that Tea Party candidate is taking.
Well, I don't know the internal politics of the Republican Party, but what I know is in the hearts and minds of the American people is Medicare, 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 and we see that not only in New York but all across the country.
And the number one issue by those folks who are polled in New York 26 is Medicare. And as that third-party candidate has diminished in support and vote support, most of the support has been coming from Republicans and Democrats alike to our candidate, Kathy Hochul. And what we're seeing is independents are moving towards, and seniors are moving toward Kathy Hochul as well, which is a clear sign that Medicare is the number one issue in New York 26.
But sir, also quickly say, around this time last year there was a special election in Hawaii, which Democrats did not fare as well in as it looks like they're doing this time of year. Can't you say that it's dangerous to try to read too much into special elections like this?
Well, again, I mean, we're pleased given the status of this seat. You know, this is clearly a Republican seat, and so what's incredible, I think, in this instance is the turnaround. This is a district that was won with 70% of the vote by Mr. Lee. This is a district that, as I said, in rank order would rank 426 on a potential for us to be a Democratic seat. So again, Kathy Hochul deserves an awful lot of credit. It is a special election, clearly. Steve Israel deserves an awful lot of credit in terms of his effort. And if there's anyone that would dampen down the results, it would be the practicality of this is such that we should not be in a position to win this. But we are, and we are because, as Xavier has said, is because of Medicare.
Mr. Becerra, you said that this is probably the best indicator of what the American people feel about the Republican plan. If the Republican candidate does pull off the win, does that stand as an affirmation of the Ryan plan?
Probably the best answer to that question is what Senator Scott Brown recently said, what Senator Murkowski recently said, what Senator Snowe recently said, where they have all come out to say that the Ryan plan, the Ryan budget, the Republican budget that goes after Medicare is not what they would support. I think they're listening to the American people. They're probably listening to their constituents and saying that the Republican elimination of Medicare as we know it is not where they want to go. But I certainly think that New York 26 is a clear indication of how people feel about the Republican plan to end Medicare as we know it. Or as Newt Gingrich said, social engineering at its worst from a guy who, of course, was willing to let Medicare die on the vine. And so New York 26 is a great indication of what the mood is. But look, we've got a great candidate. Kathy Hochul is going to win this because she's just a great candidate. It so happens that Republicans have given Democrats a great issue to really highlight to the American public the differences between Democrats and Republicans, because we'd like to continue to improve Medicare. They'd like to go ahead and end it.
Congressman Larson, it's been more than 60 days since the U.S. began military action in Libya. Senator Lieberman has introduced a resolution in the Senate to support limited military action. Would you support that, and how important do you think it is for Congress to officially weigh in?
Well, I think it's important. We had this discussion in our caucus. I think that's the important thing is that we look at our strategy overall going forward with regard to the War Powers Act. It's long overdue for this country and this Congress. Beyond any individual resolution, this is a long overdue discussion and dialogue that needs to take place in this Congress and with the American people. Currently, and obviously, the administration feels they have the authority, you could argue that fact, and certainly it will be argued in our caucus privately and I think publicly. But with regard to Mr. Lieberman's resolution, I haven't seen it or read it, but certainly I would. Certainly, you'd pay any attention to anything as critical as sending the nation to war.
Chairman Larson,
Yeah.
can you talk a little about the conversation surrounding the Patriot Act reauthorization that could come to the floor this week or next week? I know you had an FBI briefing earlier today. What were people talking about? A lot of Democrats didn't vote for the short-term reauthorization earlier this year.
Well, of course, it was a classified briefing, and there were a number of issues, obviously, that came up that we cannot speak to. But suffice it to say, I think your question indicates that there remains a lot of concern about civil liberties and their protection and the balance that exists, and also a concern about the technological advances that complicate these issues, again, which is why it requires both sensitivity and thoughtfulness. We were pleased that a number of our chairs, or ranking members, excuse me, were present at that meeting and help illuminate some of the underline and underscore some of the concerns that members have.
Sir, a follow-up on that, do you think that Republicans will need the support of Democrats to pass that, and are either of you planning to vote for the reauthorization this week?
Well, I don't know what the Republicans will do. I have been opposed to the Patriot Act and continue to have reservations about it, but I am only speaking for myself.
It was interesting to hear Director Mueller this morning in this classified briefing. It's clear that they're working very hard to uncover whatever information we can get to find out who the people are that are trying to harm us. At the same time, there are some lingering questions about how you make sure you're targeting the right people and not going after innocent Americans, and that we continue to uphold the tradition of the Constitution, which protects our civil liberties. There are some amendments that will be put on the floor that I believe would perfect the bill as it stands, and there's a great anticipation that we can move forward in a bipartisan fashion to try to strike a compromise that both provides Americans with the security that we are entitled to, and at the same time respects the constitutional protections of our civil liberties.
So you are expecting an open rule on the Patriot Act?
We don't know for sure whether it will be an open rule or not. But I'd like to join with the Vice Chair in also acknowledging both Ranking Member Conyers and Ruppersberger, who have put forward a perfecting amendment that I think has broad appeal.
If I could get back to, excuse me, Medicare, most analysts would say that the projected spending for the program is unsustainable. Is there anything Democrats are considering to curb spending for the program?
Yes, I'll defer to my colleague who has, but but I just want to point this out because this is, and I raise this at every forum that I'm with. You know, the idea here is the cost of health care in general. Reuters came out a year and a half ago saying that there was $700 billion annually in waste, inefficiencies, and abuses that take place within the healthcare system. It's those issues that rank us near 20% of gross domestic product, which is the cost associated, the increase in cost that's associated. Would we not make sure that we are going through every single one of those areas? I've had businesses from my own state come to me, including IBM, saying just a slight change in the forms results in $50 billion in savings. I think this is where we can work bipartisanly. I think this is where the direction that we need to go. And yes, Democrats will continue to do that, but our leader on this has been Xavier Becerra.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I know you know this. So when you all ask your question, you're either trying to move us in a direction or maybe you made a slip. But Medicare itself doesn't have increasing costs. Medicare is simply a reimbursing system. It's the healthcare system that has growing costs. And as a result, Medicare has to dedicate a growing number of dollars to reimburse for the same service that cost less the previous year. And so if we don't control the cost of health care, You can't control the cost to Medicare. But simply because you control the cost to Medicare, the reimbursement levels for Medicare, doesn't mean you've done anything to control the cost of health care, which is why so many of us and so many Americans are panicked over the Republican proposal to end the guaranteed coverage from Medicare, because if you turn it into a coupon, it becomes coupon care, a voucher, and you have now reduced the amount of reimbursement under Medicare while you've done nothing to control the high growing cost of health care. What you've essentially told America's seniors is, we're going to give you less and less support to cover higher and higher health care costs. And so if you want to really get a grip on health care costs for seniors through Medicare, then you've got to control the cost of health care. You don't just simply cut the reimbursement rates for Medicare. That's why the CBO said to us that the Republican plan to end Medicare as we know it will end up costing seniors so much money, because the Republican plan to end Medicare does nothing about health care system costs, which is, by the way, contrary to what we did in our health care reform of last year, where we went after the costs of health care, which is what the chairman pointed to, the replication of services, the overutilization of services, x-rays, MRIs, more than necessary. If you curtail those uses, you reduce the costs. If you reduce the costs, you can then reduce the reimbursement amounts within Medicare. So I know there was a slip there in the question.
Thank you very much.